All right, cool. I will say hello and welcome back to another episode of All About Balance. And today I am joined by none other than Mr. Adam Adshead. Adam, how you going?
Good, man. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you. You know, I am a fan of your podcast as well,
Cool.
and I know you had Lloyd Cooper on recently, and it's nice to be on a podcast which is all about balance and not just about jiu-jitsu. I'm looking forward to a good chat about a few different areas, and let's get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, when I had a chat with Lloyd, it was sort of a spurious conversation that was first born because of his rant about jiu-jitsu. But we talked a little bit off air, and I guess it's pertinent to say it now. Is I think that, and this is no disrespect to podcasts that delve into the sports side of you guys, but there's so much more to people than just their athletic endeavors, and although that athletic endeavor may dominate a lot of their time and a lot of their mental capacity, I think that there's so much more to guys and or females, people, and that's something that I really care about. I care about conversation and less so for this medium, the athletic endeavor. But the first thing I will start with is I saw that you're wearing a whoop strap, I believe.
Good spot.
Yeah. And I followed you on Instagram for a little while and seen that you've done a lot of cold exposure and all that sort of stuff recently. First of all, why the fuck would you even think about jumping into a cold lake?
Man, I mean, we've been doing it a little while, like a few of the guys at the gym and stuff. And I think especially at the moment, with lockdown and with kind of so little options in terms of training and stuff. I kind of posted about it a little while ago, and people asked me about why I do it. The thing is, for me, like, I like challenge and I like to be pushed outside of my comfort zone. That's why I like to compete. That's why, I've taken risks in business. That's why, I do what I do, and it's part of me as a man, to be kind of like challenged and to be pushed. And at the moment, especially because it's so cold, like, I like the idea of like going to the reservoir near me. It's freezing cold. I get nervous still about going in because it's never easy, and I get those little butterflies when in the morning when I'm going to go. So Sunday morning, tomorrow morning, I'll be there. And I like that. Like, I feel like I've achieved something afterwards. Obviously, with the cold and stuff, there's a lot of benefits, from a health point of view, from a well-being point of view and stuff. And Wim Hof has obviously massively kind of popularized that over the last couple of years. But then at the same time, I like the idea of that for sure. But at the same time, it's a good challenge, and it's definitely something I'm going to continue to do.
So you mentioned, there's a lot to take from that, but first of all, I just want to sort of dive into, when you say you like challenge, what does challenge mean to you?
I mean, I think the thing is, essentially, I kind of gauge whether or not something's worthy of it, of the challenge, is how nervous it makes me. And like, the more nervous it makes me, the more that I want to do it. So obviously, I mean, you probably know that I did Polaris recently, did the teams event and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was massively underweight for that and all that stuff. And I like to do things like that, regardless of the result and stuff, because I don't know, it just makes me feel alive. And I think it's, it helps push the boundaries of what I feel like I'm capable of, because ultimately, like, I think as a human being, like, we're capable of way more than we actually are. We think we are. And the only way we're going to be able to understand that is by trying things and pushing ourselves and accepting challenges, even if it might not go our way, or it might be, a negative experience, or make us really nervous, or whatever. So that's what challenge means to me, really.
Yeah. And I think, what you touch on there is actually the result of an endeavor is not intrinsically tied to the endeavor itself. So, you undertaking jumping in a fucking reservoir on a Sunday morning, of all days, a Sunday, like, that is an endeavor in itself. Now, you could stay in there for a minute and a half, or you could stay in there 20 seconds and be like, fuck this, I'm getting out. Like, the result of the endeavor isn't necessarily tied to the endeavor itself, but it's important that there is a result, right? Because the result is what gives you that feedback of either, well, I'm going to do that challenge again, aka every week I'm going to jump into a reservoir, or I'm not going to do that challenge again because, you know, I broke a leg when I jumped in the reservoir, or whatever it is, right? Like, I think the feedback of challenge is underlooked, you know, undervalued.
I think so. And the thing is, we're so capable as humans to, you know, to push our boundaries and to try new things. And I think that the reason, especially at the moment, like I'm posting a lot of these things on you know, Instagram and stuff, is it's not to show off. It's not like to say, oh, look at me, I'm doing this, like I'm superhuman or anything. It's to basically to try and like encourage other people to do something a bit different, because whilst we're in lockdown and whilst people are like deteriorating their mental health and getting so negative and run down about things, it's like, look, there are things you can do out there, you know, which can help you, and not only maybe help you at the moment, but you can kind of take these kind of experiences, these trials, these tribulations and stuff, and use that in your life in the future. And you know, I did the same the other day where I gave blood the other day. I just signed up to give blood. I've done it before, you know, I usually try and do it a couple of times a year, but I don't like needles. Like, I don't like giving blood, but like it makes me nervous. So I know that I need to do it. Like, it's something I needed to do. Obviously with the blood donations and stuff, there's a great kind of reason behind that, rather than just jumping in the reservoir for my own self-worth. But at the same time, like, it just breaks the week up a little bit, and I think some people need that at the moment. And I do hope that if people are listening to this who maybe do follow me on Instagram and stuff, they see that I'm posting these things, like I'm going on all these walks and, like, you know, in my area and stuff, just to try and like give people a little bit of reasoning of you know, like how maybe they can help themselves, because at the moment, like, we all need a little bit of a, you know, a bump in the right direction because of everything that's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, I echo your sentiment a little bit about needles. Now I have a number of tattoos, but if it came to me getting injected or vaccinated, I'd be a puddle of mud on the floor. Like, you know, those things scare the life out of me. But and on the thing of social media, like, I get it, but at the end of the day, there's very little that you can do to control how your content is received, right? And the likelihood of, if somebody takes your content to be detrimental, or they take a detrimental view of you because of your content, it's very, very unlikely that it's actually to do with you. You know, there's this strange ether that exists in the middle of a sentence and how somebody interprets that sentence. And, you know, I think social media just exaggerates that slightly, but, you know, you're just going out and living your life the best you can, right? And I don't really think that anyone can have a negative opinion of that. You know, the jealousy, I guess, you know, that probably what it roots down to is probably due to laziness. You know, like, sure, don't get me wrong, the Thames is just over there. I'm not jumping in it though. I'm telling you, I'm definitely not jumping in it. Because, you know, you talk about all these health benefits. I think there's probably a health detriment if I jump in the Thames. But, you know, there are, like you've said, there are ways and means around everything. And I think something that you talk on that really resonates is sort of, you're very adaptable, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I think that's one thing that jiu-jitsu has taught me over the years, you know, like we have to adapt constantly in a sparring situation. And I think that's one thing I've always tried to do over the years with my jiu-jitsu training is, and I try and teach this as much as possible to my guys and stuff as well, is like, look, you know, you can learn an armbar, but like, what lessons can you take from that you can actually apply in terms of leverage, in terms of positioning, whatever it is, and actually apply that to your own life and stuff. And because ultimately, like there is much more to jiu-jitsu, and jiu-jitsu is my life, and it still will be after lockdown, and it still will be forever. But I do think it's important, and that's one thing that I've learned definitely over the last kind of year or so, is that, you know, again, quoting the title of your podcast, it is all about balance, man. You know, and you have to have that. And I am enjoying doing different things at the moment, and, you know, doing bits of artwork and doing bits of walking and stuff, and doing the cold exposure stuff, just to kind of mix things up and take from those experiences and maybe take them back to the mat, and, you know, in the future and stuff. You know, it's all about that.
I think there's a couple of things to take from that. One is the art, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think the second point that you've made that again, you know, resonates quite a lot is the idea of sort of having a multitude of exposure to things, right? Like, you know, the best way to get good at something, you know, Jesus, what am I trying to say? I feel like when you've learned something to a really high level, like yourself, the idea of learning is a lot less scary, right? And I think that you can then introduce yourselves to bountiful other things. And generally, what you find is patterns in everything. And the pattern that you find in artwork, for instance, you can then take back to your day job. You can then take and use that when you go out on your walks, or you can see the artistry, or you can see the patterns or whatever in a cold reservoir, or you can see it in a meal you eat, or in whatever. I feel like you know, the exposure to different things only will broaden your horizons, but in a very interesting way. I feel personally it always brings you back to the same notion of there's an essence to everything, a similar essence to everything, a core to everything.
No, definitely, and that's the thing. It's one of them, like I could literally just sit here and talk jiu-jitsu with you all day and stuff, and but at the same time, like there's more out there, and I find it much more interesting, like how you can kind of draw from different experiences and stuff like that. So, you know, if we come back to the cold water stuff, like standing on the side of a reservoir, like, you know, if you're, actually you might not be up tomorrow because you'll be watching the UFC, but like 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, like I will be on the side of that reservoir ready to get in. And I actually don't feel any different to when I'm at the side of a mat and I'm just about to compete. Like, and there's transferable experiences, and like I said, regardless of what you're doing. And the thing is, for me at the moment, and I'm trying to tell my guys this as much as possible, look, the gym's closed, it's locked down, we can't train at the gym at the moment. But look, there are things out there in the world that you can do, and there's experiences you can have, and you can do things and stay fit and stay kind of mentally positive, and read books and do art and listen to music and watch films or whatever, like that you can then actually transfer back to your training and stuff. It's like, it's not all doom and gloom. Like, you look, I mean, obviously most people listen to it, so they can't see your amazing background and all your artwork that your girlfriend's done. And but like, that's a great example of finding, you know, using the time appropriately. And I'm all about productivity, and I'm all about kind of you know, pushing things forward and trying to maximize, you know, what we're capable of doing, you know.
Yeah, so I guess I'll make one disclaimer, and then I'll ask my question. The first disclaimer is Imogen didn't actually do this artwork. She's merely the curator and the architect of this room. So, you know, all the furniture and everything was sort of purchased from her. But the question I have is, you know, you've mentioned art a couple of times. Like, talk me through that. How did you get to that position?
Well, I mean, basically having extra time. I mean, I've gone from being you know, training twice a day, you know, teaching jiu-jitsu like literally 7 days a week, and being at the gym or doing private sessions like 365 days a year, to having all this extra time. And you know, if people listen to this podcast, I even asked Harry to come on earlier because like we were meant to meet about you know, chatting about another hour, and I'm like, man, let's get this on the way, because I don't sit still very well, and I like to stay busy, and I like to be productive. And you know, during lockdown one, I started to try doing a little bit of artwork. I mean, I'm not trained in any capacity or anything. I didn't have any real kind of kit or anything, but I've followed quite a few kind of like graffiti and like calligraphy Instagrams accounts for many years and stuff, and always had a huge kind of soft spot for that. And then essentially just started to kind of do my own bits and bought loads of Sharpies and canvases and just started to play around with it, and with no kind of real plan of becoming an artist or doing anything, but just having a creative outlet. And my coach, Chris Houter, who is one of the Dirty Dozen, one of the first like 12 non-Brazilian black belts. I always remember like one of the first times I ever met him, and he said, I'm not a martial artist, I'm an artist, you know. And I sat there and I was like, wow, like it really struck a chord with me, because I was like, I'm the same. Like, I don't consider myself a fighter. I don't consider myself a martial artist. I'm just an artist. And, you know, whether I'm painting with a brush or I'm kind of like sparring, like, I feel like the same creative outlet is kind of, it's the same process for me, you know. And like, whilst we can't be doing jiu-jitsu in the same way that we have been, like, I'm looking for other creative outlets and stuff. And like one of my black belts, he makes a lot of beats and he's doing a lot of music stuff at the moment. And, you know, I've got friends who doing loads of cooking and trying different things that way. Like, it's all positive, man. And I think it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I do have quite a pessimistic view of how society is going to be after this lockdown finishes. I think there's going to be compounding societal problems, especially in London. I mean that's where I live right now. So that's really the only data I have to go on. But you know, I think there's something to that. There's something about finding artistry. There's something about finding productivity in things. There's something about, you know, looking past what is frankly a less than optimal situation, right? You know, for yourself, from a financial perspective, from sort of a purpose perspective, you know, you were taken away from what gives you both of those things, essentially, you know, by choice and whatever. But to sort of, and I think what you said was really beautiful, because you mentioned that you basically just did some artwork, but not to become an artist, not to make money out of it, just for the idea of doing it.
Yeah.
And I think there's some really, really, really interesting psychological benefits to doing that. Whether it be, finding a recipe in a book and making it, and it may be absolutely terrible at the end, right? But you gave it a go, and then you can review it and go again. And with your artwork, right? Like, nobody even has to see it, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I've not seen any of it posted on Instagram. Maybe you've got a separate one, I don't know, but like, you know. Yeah, that is fucking cool. That is fucking cool.
People on the podcast won't be able to see it, but there's one of the canvases I got to hand.
So if anyone wants to go over to the YouTube channel, and you can not only watch this podcast, but you can also see Adam's artwork.
Nice.
But like, you know, so let's talk about that a little bit. Like, you know, the characters that you've just shown on that canvas, like Jesus, this is a huge question, so I'm trying to ask it in a slightly easier fashion. But you know, how do you choose what comes through that pen onto that canvas?
I mean, there's very little kind of. I mean, like I said, at first it was just the idea of trying to do something, and I think it's probably like anything. I mean, I'm not musical at all. I mean, in a previous life, and the closest thing I've ever had to a job was being a music journalist, but I'm not musical in any fashion. I've never played an instrument or anything. But I imagine when you first start playing an instrument, you know, especially singing. When I used to do interviews with people, a lot of people used to say that when they learn to sing, they would sing like their favorite artists, right?
Yes,
so like
that's true.
So if you hear like you know, it's kind of a little bit heartbreaking sometimes when you see, like, you find a new artist or whatever, and then you YouTube them like interviewed by such a body, and they sound like completely different to the way that they sing. You're like, what? Like, it's a totally different thing, because essentially they're putting on an act and they're trying to sing like their heroes and things like that. So for me, a lot of the characters at first when I was doing art, I was essentially like copying some of the stuff I was seeing on Instagram and stuff. And then now the more I've got into it, I've tried to kind of find my own style. And again, most of it is just, what's the word? Just like say, just going with the flow of it and just trying to make things up as I go along, really. Whereas at first it was trying to emulate other styles and copy a lot of other things that I've seen. So I guess that's the same with any art, really. And it's not, like I said, it's not something I'm gonna try and like mold into a career or anything. But I think it is good for us to have outlets, especially creative outlets. And I guess at the moment that's one of mine.
It comes with a certain level of mastery, though. You know, there's imitation at the beginning of everything, I think.
Yeah.
You know, whether it be art, whether it be music, whether it be sport, it could be anything, but there is imitation in anything. But you only get to a level of creative freedom, I think is the right way to phrase it.
Yeah.
When you have a fundamental understanding of what it is you're attempting to do. And then I think when you have a conscious understanding of what you're attempting to do, you can then allow that flow state, and I hate using that phrase, but that sort of thing where you're autonomously just making movements rather than, you know, you're actively choosing to do X, Y, and Z. And I mean, you know, I did a little bit of drums when I was a kid, and you know, I would drum like Joey Jordison down to the way he held sticks, right? Like everything. I would do absolutely everything like Joey Jordison. And then it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe 4 years deep, and I was never great. I was never great at drums. I just didn't. I had good hand-eye coordination, but I just couldn't keep a beat. My metronome ability is 0.
Right.
But I enjoyed it, right? I had a great time, and it was cool to learn, and it was cool to go with. But you're absolutely right. When you got to a level of knowing your rudiments and knowing what certain positions to hold your sticks and whatever, you could then sort of just play, not copy, but play. And, you know, sometimes some really cool shit came out, and sometimes some absolutely awful noises came out as well. But, you know, I think there's something, you know, I wanted to ask, like you said about motivation and, you know, being productive and all this stuff, like, there's bountiful people that take the easy road. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think as humans, we do like comfort, and I think a lot of people are scared of either losing, you know, especially if you look at like jiu-jitsu or whatever, or they feel like inferior. They feel like that they're not able to kind of, like say, step out of their comfort zone and stuff. And I don't know. I think it's that whole kind of fight or flight kind of dilemma, really, and that's why, coming back to the Cold War stuff, that's what I love about that, because I've seen people, you know, at the reservoir and stuff, like get in and straight away they get out of the Cold War, and because their body's telling them to flee to survive, and that's the right thing to do.
Sure.
But I have, over the years, for some reason, I'm not tough, I'm not resilient or anything, but I fight, like, and I like the fact that, you know, if something does make me scared or does make me nervous, stuff, that I push back against that, and I do take the difficult road. You know, like I say, I've done I mean, I lost loads of matches, but I've never turned stuff down, because, like I said, I'd rather have tried and failed rather than not tried at all. And I know it sounds really cliche and stuff, but I think most people like the comfortable life, and there is nothing wrong with that. But that isn't for me. You know, I think a lot of people see the things that I do and think, oh, well, it's okay for you or whatever. But like, you've got to live your own life and stuff. And for me, I'll always be the that guy who wants to kind of push the boundaries and step out of his comfort zone, you know.
Why though? Like what makes you be that person?
I guess in a way it is to, like, I don't know. I guess it's probably to, in a way, it's probably to separate myself from other people, and that's not in a bad way to look down on somebody. But I like to do things that other people haven't done or don't do, and things, because, like I say, it's more interesting that way. Like, you know, I think I find it much more interesting to talk to people about, like, something they're passionate about, than to be all doing the same thing. And, like, you know, I don't know. I think it's I don't know, I get bored easily, I guess, and just sitting and watching Netflix and, you know, staying at home, and it's not for me, man. You know, I've got to be active, and I've got to be busy. And I think ultimately, like, that probably comes from my upbringing. You know, I'm from a working class family, and my dad always kind of taught me, like, to be busy and to, like, work. And, like, I had I come from a big family where all my kind of uncles and my granddad and stuff all worked for themselves, and all tradesmen and stuff. And, you know, I saw that stuff growing up, and I guess I've always had a strong work ethic. And whilst, you know, I like to work, and I've built my business up and my club and stuff, and I still like to take that kind of work ethic into my personal life and my own social time and stuff. And, you know, I'm not even in the normal kind of the normal world, which whatever that is, like, I'm not a party guy. Like, I'm quite introverted. Like, I'm not really that sociable or anything, but so I have to do things. I have to, like, do other things, like, and I guess that makes me a little bit different. And but I think that's a good thing.
I agree. I mean, I think the thing that you touched on that's probably the most pivotal thing to pull out from there is you just have to live your own life. And I find that is really difficult. And it's really difficult until you make the choice to do what you determine to be the right thing. And even that can be difficult. You know, we're in an age of, you touched on it before, we're in an age of imitation. Well, if there's a platform that resonates imitation more than Instagram, I'm yet to find one. And I find that Instagram is highly addictive, right? And it's highly addictive because it's got all the notions of society in there. It's got hierarchies. It's got instant gratification. It's got long-term gratification. It's got interaction. It's got all this stuff. And that shit can suck you in, and you're 4 hours deep every day. And at the end of it, I feel like what comes out is a much deeper detriment than a positive. You know, I feel like Instagram detaches you. If you're to engage in the sort of the core nature of Instagram, it detaches you further from your identity than it brings you closer. And I feel like somebody like yourself, who has clearly spent a lot of time away from Instagram, it's much easier of a statement for you to say you've just got to live your own life. But it's you know, that's a difficult statement to make, or a difficult proposition to give somebody, if it's difficult, if you ask them what do they want, and the answer is I don't know. You know, it's hard to architect a life on confusion, essentially, you know.
I mean, you're totally right. And you know, I think it is difficult for a lot of people. I remember even, like, being at, like, school and, like, college and university and stuff, and speaking to people, and they say, oh, what do you want to do? And they're like, I don't know, you know. And ultimately, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Some people don't know what they want to do with their life. But I think what you can do is to try and kind of at least move it towards, or be taking some kind of gradual steps to try and create a life which is, you know, fulfilling for you, and whatever that is. And I've been really fortunate to be able to do that with jiu-jitsu. I did it before as a journalist as well, because I found a job which I love to do, and at the same time, like, gives me all these kind of creative outlets and stuff, you know. But some people do say to me, oh, well, you're lucky, it's all right for you, you're lucky because you train jiu-jitsu every day, or you're lucky because I was a professional journalist and stuff. But I had to create that life and work at it to do that. And I think I wish sometimes some people would be a little bit more aware of like the work that you have to put into kind of get the freedom and the happiness and the life that you truly believe you once wanted, and that you hope that you'd have one day, and that now you do have, you know.
And I think what's interesting too is you just said, oh, you know, you've got to put a lot of work in to achieve this freedom. Well, that's freedom for you, right? Like if somebody else was in your shoes and they had a gym that's currently got nobody in it, right?
Yeah.
You've got coaches that aren't coaching, you've got, you know, students that aren't learning, etc., etc., etc. For some people, that sounds like a fucking nightmare, not freedom at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, for somebody that's a little bit more normalized, and you understand the community that you've built, and you know the work that's gone into it and all this sort of stuff, it is freedom. And I think that these things are all, you know, this is why this conversation is so difficult, is because almost everything is relative. You know, there is an essence to everything, but the essence that's drawn from one person to the next is entirely different. Now, I want to touch on the journalism, because I do a little bit of writing myself, and I wondered, you know, how did you get into journalism? Why did you become a journalist?
Yeah, so basically, I did a really boring degree at university, which was business information systems. I hope they don't do it anymore, because it's horrible. And you know, I think we could probably talk for hours about like the education system, and in terms of how it funnels people to make decisions very early on. And I was in the same boat. You know, I remember being like a 15-year-old kid and like picking like business studies and IT because I like those two areas. And then suddenly the A levels I had to pick were based on the GCSEs I did. And then it was business studies and IT. And then it was like, right, well, what degree do you want to do? Well, hang on a minute, it needs to be something business related and IT related. So I ended up in this kind of business IT related degree, which I hated very early on. But I was already trained in jiu-jitsu at that point. And, you know, so I had a good outlet because I wasn't, like I said before, I wasn't a party animal, and I wasn't kind of like going out and doing the whole university thing that most kids did. I was living at home, you know, with my dad and stuff. And like, so, but that was fine. You know, I was training jiu-jitsu, I was doing my university course. And then I decided in the last year that, you know what, I ain't going in this direction. I want to change. And I listened to music, but like I was late to the game listening to music. I wasn't one of these kind of kids who'd been brought up on music, their parents' music and all this side of things. But I still enjoyed music, and I did enjoy writing. Even though I didn't have any kind of background, you know, I think I got like a C or something in GCSE English. I didn't do any A levels or anything. But, you know, I'm kind of like patting myself on the back here a little bit. But I've always been quite good at like reverse engineering a solution. And I kind of looked at it and said, look, right, how do I like become a professional music journalist? You know, and I remember going onto some kind of careers website, and it said something like there's 600 professional music journalists in the UK. And I was like, right, challenge accepted. And I just basically kind of took what I thought was the right like plan of action, the route to kind of get to becoming a professional journalist. And I took the steps one step at a time. I started writing in the last year for the university kind of newspaper and stuff, which is what most people do when they start kind of cutting their teeth. And then when I finished university, I decided to, you know, I started writing for a few like independent magazines and, you know, websites and blogs and stuff. But even from day one, like I wanted to, my goal was to work for Enemy, you know, like I wanted to write for Enemy. That was the holy grail. Like everybody wanted to do that as a music journalist. It was incredibly difficult for me living in Manchester to be able to do that. But fast forward 2-3 years, you know, I ended up working for Enemy. and you know, I had to work hard to get there. I also had to blag to get work experience at NME, because they wouldn't accept graduates. They would only accept people on journalism degrees. So what I did was I faked a letter saying I was on a journalism degree, and I managed to get work experience at NME. And at the time, I think they offered something like, there was usually 4 people in the office, 4 work experience kind of kids each week. And I think they did that for, I think, like 50 weeks a year. So very like small numbers of people were able to kind of do that each year. And that first year I did it twice. I was really fortunate to get invited back and do a second one. And then I started freelancing for them. And then I eventually got a job as a news reporter based in Manchester. So it was, yeah, I loved it. It's definitely something I miss doing. But like we said before, in terms of creative outlets and stuff, like, you know, you just kind of find different ways to do it. And jiu-jitsu, after I left journalism, I ended up kind of just going down the road of jiu-jitsu full-time, went full-time with jiu-jitsu, and that kind of scratched that itch. So it kind of comes full circle, really, I guess.
And what, as a news reporter based in Manchester working for NME,
yeah,
what did you do day to day? Who did you speak to? What was your actual job?
So my actual job, most of the time I was covering stuff out of hours. So basically, the guys in the office would be like 9 to 5, 9 to 6. And then I would kind of log on and kind of clock in from like 6 p.m. onwards. So like essentially, if anything happened from pretty much from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m., 7 a.m. in the morning, you know, like if somebody died in the middle of the night, you know, we'd get like, I'd be writing obituaries and getting that kind of news story up. And a lot of American news, obviously, with the time difference and stuff. So like if you know, Arcade Fire like suddenly announced like a new album or a tour or whatever, like I would like quickly kind of write the news reports and get that on our website to be able to you know, get the lead and get the head start from like a SEO point of view and stuff over our competitors. And then I'd be doing things like gig reviews and, you know, interviews and stuff. So, you know, like especially at night, obviously that's when gigs are and stuff. So I'd set a couple of news reports up during the early evening, maybe dash into Manchester. And again, pretty fortunate because, you know, anybody is touring, they're going to stop in Manchester, which is really cool. So I was able to kind of, you know, maybe do that and then get back and write my news report or my set list up or my interview or whatever it was. So it was cool. Did festivals, you know, covered festivals, did all sorts of stuff like that. So it seems like a long time ago now, but it was a cool kind of chapter in the history. It'll go down in my autobiography.
For sure. I mean, it'd be cool to write one. Actually, you should do one. That would be interesting. This is just a sort of a loose question, but who's the greatest artist or band you've ever seen live?
Oh, that is tough, man. Oh, that is really, really difficult. You know, I mean, I've been asked that before, and I guess it's also probably changes. Like, I guess if I'd just been listening to loads of, you know, I don't know, like the Smiths or something, like, and you know, I might say that or whatever. But I don't know. I think, and it's one of those things, right, where like I think sometimes when, especially when artists and stuff like die, right, like almost there's this kind of extra kind of sheen to their like level of their aura, their kind of like whole being. So the first person that came into mind when you said that was Prince, right?
Jesus
So
Christ.
I saw Prince, right, at a festival, Roskilde Festival in Denmark. I covered for NME when I was working for them. And it's funny because, you know, like I think someone like Prince is an artist where most people, regardless of what music you're into, and I'm into all sorts, by the way, I'm not just into like one category of music, can look at that and say, oh my God, like he was like a phenom, like musician. And it's funny because at the time I was working, you know, like, and I didn't really kind of look that deeply into his music until like after he died, because it was kind of like, oh, hang on a minute, this guy's gone now. And I think it's the same with that set. Like when I saw him live, I was like, oh my God, this guy is as good as people thought he was. But I think since he died, like it kind of has more power. But I don't know whether that's just because like you can't see him anymore and like and what have you. But yeah, I'm gonna go with that, Prince. Let's go with Prince.
I think that's a solid answer. And a slightly different question, but what's the best gig that you've been to? So what I mean by that is venue and crowd and, you know, everything put together.
Oh man, that's tough. It's really difficult. Like I've been asked this a lot over the years as well. I think a lot of the smallest, I always find that like smaller gigs are the best. And especially in Manchester, the venues I like the most, like venues like Night and Day Cafe, which is really small, maybe like 200, 300 people, you know, especially over arena stuff and even festivals stuff to a degree. Like the smaller venues are kind of like where it's at. One of the gigs that again, I always try and go off instinct, right? I think over the years, especially with years of jiu-jitsu, I always go off my gut. I trust my gut. And the first gig that kind of came to mind when you asked that, for some reason, I've not thought of this for a while, so we're just going to go with it, right? It was a guy called Jerry Fish and the Mudbug Club. All right, you probably never heard of him, right?
Nope.
And it was it was kind of like a bit like Tom Waits, a bit kind of like soul-y, a bit kind of like, you could tell like he had a really raspy voice, probably smokes like 40 a day and stuff.
Lad.
But the atmosphere in that kind of venue, like with 200 people, and at one point he got everybody just to sit down on the floor. Like we all just sat on the floor and it was super chill. This was like, I don't know, probably like, it was, well, I'll tell you what it was. It was probably, I remember people smoking in there. So it was probably before the smoking. It's quite a while ago. And I just remember like seeing the control that he had over the room, you know, which I've seen before with like different artists and stuff. But I think that would be maybe not my favorite gig, but definitely one of the most memorable, to have like people jumping up and down, drunk on a Friday night, like full of energy. And then just to chill it out and just get everybody just sitting on the floor. Like, I think at one point, like people were like linking arms and stuff. And it was sitting on like a sticky floor in like a 200 person club in Manchester. That's definitely one of the most memorable gigs that I went to.
Yeah, I mean, my offering for that is probably one of two. One was a festival gig and one was a tiny gig. The festival gig was Black Sabbath at Download.
Sweet, yeah.
Just because being in a crowd of 100,000 people was just mental. And the second one I will offer was, have you heard of Your Demise?
No.
So Your Demise are an English group, not around anymore. And I went to go and see them in a venue called the Sugar Mill in Stoke.
Yeah.
And it's a phenomenal venue because it's so small, and it's one of those where the stage is only about 2 foot off the ground, and a band called Let Live opened for Your Demise, and the lead singer for Let Live is one of those guys that just commands a room, right? Mm-hmm. And it was just an insane evening. I went in with a white t-shirt and it came out red, right? So it was one of those kind of nights. Just there's something about the emotional connection that you have to music and to artists, and there's almost an instant community that's created and fashioned inside of gigs that is almost impossible to replicate outside of gigs. You know, you'll know better than I will. You've probably been to gigs 10 times, 100 times more than I have, but there's just a magic. That's the only way I can really describe it, is a magic that's created when a certain artist or band enraptures a room and brings people together with just melody and words, right?
Man, I mean, I tell you what, like one of the, like, I'm not religious at all, but like,
Sure.
like the closest I've ever been to like a religious experience, right, is at gigs. And not me personally, but like I saw Morrissey a couple of times, and like seeing his fans, his hardcore fans, literally see him as God, like on that stage, and be absolutely like throwing themselves and trying to get on the stage and just touch this guy's hand. Like, I've never seen anything like it in any other capacity. And like you say, like, music kind of brings us together in that respect. But live music is such a powerful thing, and it's such a shame that, like, at the moment that it's all on hold, because it's you know, still having friends who work in the music industry in all different kind of capacities and stuff. It's a real shame to kind of see that stuff on hold at the moment, because it's I think we're lacking it. You know, we kind of need it, you know.
Yeah, I think it's therapy in a lot of ways. Like a lot of
100%.
ways. I haven't been to a gig in a long time, mostly because it just the environment for the bands that I used to go and see just felt different, you know. Like, as with everything, the band gained new followers, the younger generation of followers, and the way that they interact with live music and gigs was different to the way that my generation, and it kind of, you just don't kind of get the same thing from those gigs. But you know, when I was younger, sort of every other weekend you'd be going into Birmingham or wherever and going to a gig or doing this or doing that, and it was kind of the only thing you looked forward to in a lot of ways, right? And not only was it a way for you to connect to your friends and do something together, but, you know, as an angsty teenager, it was a way for you to connect with music, I guess, and to connect with yourself in a really strange way. And yeah, it's incredibly powerful. Live music is incredibly powerful.
I mean, it's going to be interesting how that kind of changes, because, you know, it's the whole music kind of industry's changed so much over the last 10, 15 years that, you know, live music is where bands kind of obviously make their money, you know, a lot more now than they used to. I remember like reading and hearing from bands and stuff, and doing my research over the years and stuff. Like, some bands didn't even tour because they were making, especially in like the 80s and 90s, they're making that much money from album sales. And no one they didn't really want to tour and be away from family and kind of staying in hotels every night and stuff. So a lot of them were obligated from a contractual point of view to do tours and stuff. But a lot of them didn't even want to or have to. Whereas now it's like, you know, 5 years ago, for instance, like a lot of the smaller bands and stuff, like you're talking about before and stuff, that's how they had to make money and to exist. And now that they can't really make money unless you're kind of getting 100 million streams on Spotify, and struggling to kind of do sales and stuff in terms of, maybe they're doing a bit of money with merch and things like that, but they can't do the gigs. It's a real shame, and I'm sure there's a lot of musicians out there who are really struggling and having to like go and get regular jobs and stuff. And it's sad to see, and it's going to be interesting because that has a trickle down effect on music venues and stuff. And I'm not up to date with all the venues anymore. I used to be a little bit more aware of what was going on, but I'd imagine places like the Sugar Mill and stuff, you know, are probably either on the verge of closing or have closed because there's loads of, I do know about some in Manchester that have gone, like Gorilla and places like that, because they just
Gorilla's gone.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, because they can't afford to just open-ended have no gigs on. And I mean, I saw something the other day advertised, and I think it was like a gig. It was like rescheduled from like last summer to like March or something this year, and then they're like rescheduling it already to like next year. And I know Glastonbury's obviously cancelled this year and stuff already. I saw that the other week and I was like, oh man, like I'm not like following the news too much. I mean, I obviously am, because I want to like, you know, I don't watch TV. I don't have a TV or anything like that. I'm pretty kind of counterculture in many ways. And so I, you know, obviously I check in on the BBC website and things like that, because I've got to from a business point of view. And I do want to make sure I know what's going on. But then at the same time, like it's, that was the first thing that I kind of saw recently, where I was like, oh, actually, we're going to be in this for a little bit longer, because Glastonbury's cancelled, you know, which is has a huge effect and a trickle down effect on everything, I guess, really. It was a barometer for like, right, well, if the big music festivals are cancelled this summer, then like, when are we going to be back doing jiu-jitsu, and when are we going to be, you know, people being able to go on holiday again and stuff. It's I know obviously we don't want to probably go down too much down that route. We could probably talk all day about that, but it is interesting to see like, you know, how things are going to pan out, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy to go anywhere, to be honest. You talk and I'll go. And you know, I think you're right. Like, you know, with Pantheon specifically, you know, one of our partners, Sam, he runs massive dance events. And you know, his inside track is similar. He's not looking at doing things until summer 2021.
Yeah.
Sorry, summer 2022.
2022.
Yeah, exactly. I still think we're in 2020.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, Jesus Christ, okay. So, you know, you're looking at absolutely massive, monstrous festivals, and they're saying like, it's not fucking worth it. We're not going to do it. We're going to push it to next year. And who knows if that happens next year. And if the monoliths of social interaction are saying, we're not going to bother doing this, that, as you say, the trickle down effect is the likelihood are that the minnows are just exactly the same, right? And yeah, I mean, I did have a question about music, and if we can just round that off, because I'd be interested in your opinion. Like, what is your opinion on streaming services?
Yeah, I mean, God, I mean, I actually heard something recently saying that there's actually more money in music now, in terms of like streaming and stuff, than there ever has been in terms of like music from, so the height of music kind of money financially, like think of like the 80s and stuff, when people were buying records and CDs and things like that in the 90s and stuff. But what a lot of people would do would maybe buy like 1 or 2 albums a year, maybe they go to like 1 gig a year. Whereas now, like literally everybody has a Spotify account, or, you know, whatever service they're using. And the money, there is serious money there. And the thing is, the streaming isn't going to go away. And the cool thing about streaming is that, like, you know, me and you could collaborate in a track right now. It's going to be terrible, but like, let's do it. And we could do it. We could upload it tonight on Spotify, and we could start getting streams, and we can cut the middleman out, and we can actually start getting revenue from it. Just the same way that you can, obviously, you guys are doing with like YouTube and things like that. And obviously with podcasts and all this kind of stuff. I think it's one of those things, like, I've always been of the mindset, and hopefully I always will be, that, you know, change is good, and it's how you adapt to the change that is going to be survival of the fittest, right? In essence, is what I'm trying to say. So I think it's one of them, people are going to always, whatever it is in life, they're going to badmouth the changes. And look, you know, to go to a gig at some point, you're probably going to have to prove you've had a vaccine, or you're going to have to take a quick test. But rather than kind of get angry and kind of get like mad about that, it's making, like say, making the most out of the situation that's apparent, you know what I mean? And the bands that have done the best and will continue to do the best will adapt to the situation that they're in. So I'm a big fan of the streaming services, and I think it's a good way to kind of decentralize that control and stuff. And especially from a label point of view, like cutting the big major labels out, where you might be signing a label with someone and getting maybe 20-25% of the revenue, and now suddenly you're getting 100% of the revenue. It can only be a good thing for the artist, you know.
So I don't use streaming services.
Right.
I I buy everything.
Mhm.
So if I listen to a song or I listen to a band or I buy an album, I either buy it digitally from them or I buy it via iTunes or
Yeah.
there's a record player just behind me and I buy the records.
But I collect vinyl records. I got a good vinyl setup at my gym next to my mat and stuff. But the only problem is you'll come and see it sometime.
Of course.
But you can't play vinyl obviously when people are rolling, but
Yeah.
it's nice when I'm about in the day and stuff. But yeah, so Karen, but I just want to say I am a big fan of buying physical records as well.
Yeah, 100%. And this isn't like an anti-technology type thing, but it's more that, you know, the thing that put me off streaming services was the Taylor Swift incident.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for people that don't know, basically, you know, Taylor Swift is an incredibly successful artist, right? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of streams and listens and
billions.
Yeah. Like, you know, an insane amount of downloads. And she posted a check that she'd got, a royalty check from Spotify.
Yeah.
And it was something ludicrous, like 20 grand, right?
I know.
And if you'd have put that on record sales, you could times that by 100, and that's probably more what she's looking at, right?
Yeah. And
now I don't know whether Spotify have changed their pricing model. From a couple of people I've spoken to, it looks like they haven't changed it that drastically for the smaller that's people. Right, yeah. That to me seems very antithetical to the idea of music and the idea of supporting music and supporting the artist. Now, I could go direct to a band's website and purchase an album for £10. Let's just say, easy number, £10.
Yeah.
I'm aware that when I buy directly from that band, the lion's share of that money is going to the band. At least that's what I'm led to believe, right? Yeah. You know, I don't know what contractual agreements they've got or whatever. But if they are owning a website, they're hosting their music from that website and I'm allowed to purchase it, then my determination of that is, I'm giving my money to the band. I don't care about giving money to Spotify.
Yeah.
I don't care about giving money to a label. As you've said, decentralized finances are, especially in this instance, where you've got bands that literally they're using this to feed their families, right?
Yeah.
It's not like Taylor Swift where 20 grand's a piss in the wind. You know, this is serious money for these bands, and you know, I don't like the idea. I also don't really like the idea of how accessible Spotify is. I know that may sound strange, but
like to work for it.
But it kind of, yeah, because if you think of the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone in for these bands to craft an album that they're really proud of, I think it's too cheap for you to just be able to load up a Spotify app and listen to it. It's not enough. Like, I don't think you're doing enough credit. You're not giving enough credit to the band. Now, don't get me wrong. A tenner's just a tenner. Do you know what I mean? Like, in the grand scheme of things. But I feel like it's just a tiny bit more meaningful for you to actually purchase that album rather than to sort of just have it in your hands at all time. Well,
I think it has become a lot more throwaway. I mean, like I say, there's pros and cons massively to it. I mean, of course. I'm like, you know, I really still like getting invested in new acts and bands and stuff, and finding even people who've been around for a long time. And I think that's one of the big things about Spotify, which is so good because, you know, like you can put like some kind of random playlist on that kind of somebody's made in bloody Oregon or something, and all of a sudden you've been educated and heard an artist that you've never heard before. And I think it's one of them where, like, I mean, I've still bought, you know, 7 inches and vinyl and stuff, and supported bands and bought merch and stuff based on the fact that I've, you know, found them on Spotify. So there's obviously, there is that, but I do know what you mean. I think Lady Gaga like posted a similar check at one point, and I know like the fraction of what they're getting. I mean, I know it does stink when they can give Joe Rogan like $150 million. You kind of think, well, I remember seeing that and thinking, like, God, how much money are they making if they can give Joe Rogan $150 million, you know?
I think the big thing with that specifically, and you know, I don't know the ins and outs of that contract, but what I do know is there are some very clever people on Reddit that that have an understanding of how monetization works for podcasting and works for YouTube. And Joe Rogan was roughly looking at about 30 grand an episode, right?
Really?
Just off downloads and views, right?
Right.
Now he's put, back in the day, he would put out 2 a week, right? And he speaks, I mean, I obviously I don't listen to him anymore because I don't have Spotify, but one thing that he was saying was he tries to do 2 a days. So have podcast guests back to back. So he'll record 4 episodes in a week.
Wow.
And you know, that's content just churning. So if you're doing 120 grand in a week just from podcasts, you're probably sound. Do you know what I mean? And then when you go to somebody like Spotify and they want to buy your entire back catalog and the rights to everything in the future, and he's not signed to any label other than himself, I mean, essentially they have to give him a blank check and say, what do you want? He writes a number and they say yes or no. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's crazy, right? I mean,
it is crazy. And that's certainly not to take away from the graft that Rogan's put into to build the platform that he's got. But, you know, Lady Gaga, Taylor Swift, these are some of the most successful pop artists of all time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And to think that they're putting an album out that's taken them 6 months, let's just say.
Yeah.
And a month's earnings is 1 Joe Rogan episode. That doesn't make any sense to me.
No. I mean, I've seen it firsthand, you know, backstage at gigs and stuff where, you know, even like, I wouldn't say obviously high level artists like Taylor Swift or anything, but
sure,
mid level, like especially like indie based like album like acts and stuff, where they are literally clearing like the back end out, like taking as much food as they can, all the rider, you know, all the food, the drinks and stuff with them, because they haven't got money to be able to like waste. Like, you know, they need that stuff, and you know, I think it is a lot less glamorous. But I guess that's in a way a direct kind of like example of how the world sadly is, where like the top 2 or 3%. Look at the UFC. Like, you've got these guys, these guys who are fighting on the UFC who are on such minimum, like probably earning less than minimum wage for all the hours, all the effort and stuff that they're putting in, you know, getting a couple of grand here and there, like to show and to fight and stuff, you know, having to pay corner staff, having to like, you know, I mean, I don't know what it's like anymore, but like, I know like back in the day and stuff, like fighters had to like pay for their own like MRIs and stuff, you know, to prove that they were okay to fight and that. And it's like, everyone sees Conor McGregor and stuff, and those guys earning big dollars. But same with the music industry, like there's a huge disparity in between the top 2% and then the bottom 98%, you know.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me started on financial structures in the UFC. Just don't get me started. We will be here for hours. But you're right. Obviously, you're right. I don't think it makes it okay, but I do think you're right. And, you know, actually, to just, you know, cover off the Taylor Swift thing, did you see that she's re-recording all of her albums? No. So she put out a statement a couple of weeks ago, and she's re-recording her albums, essentially verbatim, but she's doing it now under her own record label. So she gets all the royalties rather than whatever record label she was with before. But you're right. You know, there is an essence of hierarchy to these things, and frankly, whether we like it or not, the music that we get out of bands when they're poor and they're struggling and it's their life is hard is usually their best music.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, people, you know, I think people kind of like some of their best artwork, some of their best music, some of their best kind of, you know, even jiu-jitsu guys or UFC guys, like you look at those people who some of their best fights are when they're hungry and they're coming up and they really want to like prove themselves. And there's been so many examples of that in music, in fighting and whatever, where once you kind of lose that kind of bit of a love for it and that suffering goes, like they're not the same. And it's yeah, it's an interesting kind of take on, you know, on life as a in a greater way, really. You know, it's suffering is can be an important kind of tool, as it were, you know.
I mean, you basically took the words right out of my mouth. What I was going to say is struggle is necessary.
100%, yeah.
You know, and you know, let's make sure that we quantify what I'm saying. There is a level of struggle that is not necessary, right? You know,
Yeah.
making sure that you know where your next meal comes from, with food on your, you know, food in your belly and clothes on your back, and a shelter over the top of your head. That's not necessary struggle, really. But I think everything on top of that, I could probably deem as necessary struggle, right? You know, there are things, you know, you have to be pushed in this life. You're a perfect example of this. You have to be pushed in this life in order to do anything. Now, you know, I probably, maybe I can ask you, like, what do you do to relax? What do you do to switch off? Because there has to be that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I've had to learn this over the last year or so with lockdowns and stuff like that. And you know, I mean, at the moment, I'm you know, I live in quite close to like quite a lot of rural areas, so you know, I try and go out walking a lot, and I won't take my phone, or if I do, you know, I'll turn all the data off and things like that. I try and disconnect as much as possible. So sometimes I'll just turn my data off on my phone, or turn my Wi-Fi off on my phone. In fact, actually, and this is something I just kind of randomly came up with towards the end of last year, I turned all notifications off on my phone. So I shouldn't really say this because there's a lot of guys at the gym who like to get hold of me, but the only way you can get hold of me now is to call me. That's it. So like all my WhatsApp, all my Facebook Messenger, all my email stuff, obviously from a work point of view, like I've got to be accessible and I've got to be, people got to contact me. But I found that like being too connected and too, people expected like that response within minutes. Like it wasn't allowing me to relax. It wasn't allowing me to switch off. And, you know, I've had probably, I wouldn't say hundreds of calls, but like I've had dozens of calls over the years where people have called me about jiu-jitsu, about starting training at like 10 p.m. at night on a Saturday night. And I'll still answer the call because I love to talk about jiu-jitsu. I love to run a business, you know, and people are like, oh, hang on a minute. Is somebody at the gym? Are you? And I'll be like, oh no, the number goes to my phone. Like I'm at home at the moment. And I think it's one of them where like, I've tried to disconnect a lot more. And I feel like going out walking without my phone connected to the internet, turning all my notifications off on my phone and stuff has been the way to do that. Because I don't really like, I'm not a big TV fan. Like I say, I do have a TV, but I don't have Netflix. I don't have Amazon Prime. Like I don't watch TV like series or anything. My attention span's pretty short. So even films and stuff I get bored with. That's why I love music, man. Like 3 minutes, I can listen to a track, I can get into it, or I can put an album on for 30 minutes whilst I'm cooking or whatever. And I do find that like that's like how I relax and stuff a little bit more. So I'm that's still a work in progress. But it's that's currently where I'm at with my switching off and relaxing.
Yeah, but you know, I think that if you're on all the time, that's the fastest way to burnout, right? So knowing how to turn off or having methods to turn off, I think is really important. And as you've touched on, it's tough, right? Like I use games. I use games to turn off, just because it encapsulates all of your brain and you think about nothing but that thing for the hour, 2 hours, however long it is you're playing. Because other than that, I'll just sit and think about whatever for hours and hours and hours, and it keeps me up all night, right? Whether it be a position in jiu-jitsu or whether it be the pandemic or this or that. But I agree with you. I stay as much away from TV and all that stuff as I can. You know, my missus looks at all that stuff because she wants to know when she can go back to work. and she'll tell me, oh yeah, we're in for another month. So I'm like, okay, fine.
Well, I find with everything, and that's the thing where like I've said to people who've like checked in with me, guys at the gym or family and stuff, it's like, look, the important stuff will trickle down to you anyway. Like, and it's so you don't need to have your fingers like directly on the pulse with all this stuff. And I think regardless of whether it's pandemic or not, like, I think it's one of them where like we're too connected to that, and it's like Clockwork Orange, right? Like people like they're like just forcing like stuff down the neck like 24/7. And games is, I mean, I've not been a gamer for a long time, but I actually put on our Facebook group for the club. I was like, oh, can anybody lend me like a PS3 or something or whatever? And a guy lent me a PS3, and I have been playing on Skyrim.
Oh, mate, talk about getting lost in a game. Jesus Christ.
And it's the only game that I'll play, right? I've not played it I actually took it off my TV recently because I was kind of like losing quite a lot of hours doing it. But me Lloyd Cooper got me into Skyrim when we used to live together. I used to like literally just watch him play on Skyrim for hours. And eventually I started getting into it and stuff. And having that more time recently, I was like, I put on our group, oh, could anyone borrow me? Because I had an old Xbox 360, but it died. And I put on our group, can anyone lend me an Xbox or a PS3 or whatever that they're not using? And a guy just had an old PS3 boxed up that he'd not used for years. I think he's got like a PS5 now or whatever. And then I bought Skyrim off like eBay or something for like 10 quid. And you know, I've lost a few hours with it recently. It is a great way to escape, and there's nothing wrong with that, man. Like, I'm all about the hustle. I'm all about working and trying to, you know, be productive and stuff. But if you can find ways to kind of escape and be disconnected for a little while, like, it can only benefit you and the people around you as well, you know.
And I think the point that you made earlier is a nice way to circle back is, you know, so I used to play when I was about 14 to maybe 16. I played almost professional. Call of Duty wasn't really a thing back then, but I played as close to professionally as you could get. In the UK anyway. And you know, it taught me a lot of stuff just generally in life about determination and you know, strategy and tactics, and you know, my reflexes are insane. And you know, all that stuff. And okay, you know, don't get me wrong, I don't do that now, you know, that's not how I make my money, but there's lots and even like social things, because back in those days you had to talk to everyone at every single time, and some of the stuff, some of the situations, some of the vitriol that you deal with in a Call of Duty lobby with a bunch of 14-year-olds was awful. Some things that I never repeat again, but you know, and you have to learn how to deal with those things, you know, and you have to learn how to compartmentalize those things and then continue to be successful in the game. And you know, I think there are some lessons that you can take from that just forever, right? Like the base one is just about acceptance, right? Like, okay, well, there's a lot going on right now. We're in the situation we're in. We just got to carry on, right? You've just got to win. And that can be relative to right now in the pandemic. That can be relative to a Call of Duty game. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's about kind of whatever. I think whatever's going on. I think, you know, some people are going to come out of this like you know, a lot stronger and stuff, and hopefully with a little bit more of a I don't know, like an appreciation for the smaller things in life and stuff. But it's about being, like I say, there's a thing called I don't know if you know what the Stockdale paradox is, which is essentially like, it's kind of like this guy who's like an ex prisoner of war, right? So he's tortured Jesus. And all this kind of stuff for like years and years, like 8 years, I think he was in prison for. And he had this idea that like, I'm a super optimistic person, but I'm also realistic. And I think, and they asked him a question after. They said, oh, you know, how like, you know, how did you do it? You must be super resilient. You must be kind of like tough and all this kind of stuff. And he just said he had this good combination of like optimism, but realism as well. And he said that the most pessimistic people died because like they just kind of gave up and like that was it. You know, obviously either sadly probably killed themselves in like prisoner of war camps, or were killed or beaten, or essentially just gave up and the bodies just kind of went. The super optimistic people died because they were like, oh, we're going to be out by Christmas. And then all of a sudden they weren't. And then it was like, oh, we're going to be out by Easter. We'll be saved. We'll be out of here. The war will be over. And they weren't. And I think it's one of them where like, I think at the moment, like if people have like that kind of optimistic ideal that at some point we're going to be in a better position, but they manage things realistically and realize the scope of what we're under at the moment, they're going to be a lot more healthier. They're going to be a lot more positive, a lot more proactive and stuff. And I kind of feel like I'm in that position at the moment, really, where a blend of the two is a good option moving forward, you know?
Yeah. And I think something to add a nice layer on top of that is, have you read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
No, but I do know about it. Yeah.
So, you know, he has a very similar story, and that similar story is he was a Jewish man, and he was captured, and he was taken to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And his point, you know, he developed an entire clinical psychology realm, I guess, a thread, a branch, whatever you want to call it, all derived around purpose. And he said a very similar thing in the book, is that the most optimistic people died because they couldn't cope with the ongoing nature of the situation they were in. Mm-hmm. The most pessimistic people died because, like you say, they just gave up. But for him, he said the people that continued on were the people that had purpose. They had a meaning. They had a resolve that was greater than themselves. And for him, for instance, you know, his resolve, his purpose was he wanted to go and see his wife and children again. Now, you know, he openly admits in the book he was well aware that they died, right? They were taken away from him in the lineup when they got off the trains. But it was the idea of returning home and the hope of seeing them, even though in his realistic brain he knew that he was never going to, that dragged him through. And there was a guy that, you know, had similar things, or there was a girl back in the town he lived in that he wanted to go and marry, and this and that. And the next thing is the people that were able to extradite themselves from both pessimism and optimism, and both deal with things realistically, but have a purpose, have a goal, have a reason to continue. And you know, that kind of loops us all the way back around to the very start of this, which is, you know, what you've done during this period of time is try to keep yourself as productive as possible and give yourself as many purposes, as many meanings as possible.
Oh, 100%, you know, and like I said, kind of like say looping back around with that, it's like, that's why I'm trying to like almost promote the things that I'm doing and tell people about the things that I'm doing, because I kind of think like we are capable of much more than we think, and we are kind of able to kind of help ourselves even when we think things are kind of at their worst. And you know, I'm hoping that there are going to be people listening to this who may be able to kind of take something from that. And you know, if you are listening to this and you do want to like, you know, reach out or like tell me about something that you've done which has maybe pushed yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit, or you've helped yourself, you picked a pen up, or you've picked the guitar up for the first time in 10 years, like let me know, man, because like I think it's a really positive thing that you know, you're doing in creating this and us having this chat and stuff. And I think we need more of this right now, because I've always been of the mindset like I always try and create more than I consume, you know. And I know a lot of people don't like that idea, and most people do the opposite and they consume more than they create. But, you know, maybe if you can kind of tip that scale back a little bit and be a bit more creative in whatever aspect you're doing, then, you know, the world's going to be a better place. And I know that seems like a real idealistic kind of way of kind of, you know, maybe wrapping this up or whatever. But at the same time, I do believe that. And even if that's an overly optimistic kind of take on the world, I'm realistic at the same time in the fact that even if only 1 or 2 people listen to this, kind of maybe get that as an idea and my take on things at the moment, it can only be for the greater good, you know.
I 100% agree, and I guess I'll nail 2 things onto the tail of that, and that's, you know, generally this platform was created out of me being selfish, right? Like, I really enjoy conversations like this. I really enjoy what I determine to be interesting conversations, and I thought that if I enjoy them, maybe somebody else will. So I created this, and I think it's become very important for me because it gets me talking to different people. It gets me talking every week, you know, once a week, every week, I'm talking to somebody brand new about something. Who knows what it's going to be? As I said, the preamble of this, I rock up, we have a conversation. I don't have any questions planned. It just is what it is. And you know, the thing about creating, I will give one shameless plug. I don't like doing this, but I will give one shameless plug. At this moment in time, there is a fundraiser currently running for myself. If you go to my Instagram, which is BJJ_Harry Powell, you will see all the links there. I have decided to shave my head for the Safer Places charity, hoping to raise anything over £1,000. We're currently doing really, really well, but yeah, if anyone can either share or donate to that, I would be really, really grateful. But I do think this is a beautiful place to wrap it up. So I will give the floor to you, Sir Adam, and if you can tell people where they can get hold of you, any shout outs, any sponsors, any this, any that, go for it.
Well, I first and foremost, good effort, man, and I'll definitely be donating to that. I think it's a great thing that you're doing.
Thank you.
And yeah, like that sounds like a really cool thing, and I'll definitely be giving that a share and stuff, and I'll help you out on promoting that for sure, because it's sounds like a really worthy cause. Thank you for inviting me on, for sure, man. Like, I'm in the same boat as you. Like, I love kind of having these interesting conversations with people. You know, I mean, who knew? I mean, what can you see how long we've been chatting now?
It's just over an hour and a half.
I mean, come on, like, we never met before. I mean, sometimes I think people think that we've, like, you watch these podcasts or listen to them and stuff, and you kind of think that you've been old friends for years and things. But you know, this is the first time we ever talked, and you know, it's been really cool to kind of, like, say, kind of have a chat about different things other than jiu-jitsu, even though we both really love jiu-jitsu. And you know, I've been sponsored by Scramble for many years, and Scramble have been a great brand to support not only me, but also support my club, and also just been a great kind of huge influence on UK BJJ. Obviously, they co-own Polaris, which again is a platform for me as an athlete and for many athletes in the UK and stuff. So, you know, huge shout out to Matt Benyon and to Ben Tong and all the staff at Scramble and everyone associated with those guys. And you know, so I mean, BJJ guys know about Scramble, so, but you know, give them support, and they I'm sure are going to survive this for sure. You know, they're an amazing company, but you know, if you are kind of looking for some kit and stuff and do want to support a good UK local brand, you know, get on their website, buy their stuff, because their money trickles down back into the greater world of BJJ. You know, huge shout out to everybody who's got this far into the podcast, because we're 90 minutes deep now.
Absolutely,
especially everybody at Factory BJJ. You know, without their support at the moment, the club wouldn't be, you know, there. And we've got loads of members who are still continuing to support our club and paying membership, and that's an amazing thing, which I'll probably never be able to repay back. But doing things like this, you know, creating content and hopefully providing them with a little hour and a half away from the world and having a bit of an escapism would be you know, a worthy thing from my point of view as well. So yeah, if people want to follow me, all my social media is at Factory BJJ. Like I said before, genuine kind of shout out if people do want to reach out, want to chat, want to share like some of the cool stuff they're doing, or maybe if they've been inspired to kind of maybe do something a little bit different, even cold water stuff. Happy to give advice and give some tips and stuff on breathing and what have you, and safety issues and stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So thanks very much, Harry. Thanks again, man.
Not at all. Not at all. Look, I mean, these types of conversations are my favorite, and that's ones that aren't necessarily sports related, but as you touched on, you know, we've never met in real life. This is the first time virtually speaking, and an hour and a half has kind of flown by, right? And that's kind of the beauty of this thing. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. It was a real pleasure to meet you, and as you've rightly said, I'd love to come up one day when all this stuff's sorted, and we'll get some rolls in.
Sounds good, man. I'll catch you soon.
Take care of yourself. Cheers.